My childhood sweetheart, Chloe, found herself pregnant. The father? Kane, a rough-edged punk from the vocational high school down the road. I told her brother, Chris. Kane ended up in juvenile detention. She was pressured into an abortion. Years later, after she married me, a cruel twist of fate, she deliberately aborted our child. Her words, cold and sharp, still echoed. This, Daniel, is what you owe him. On the way to the clinic for that very procedure, our car crashed. And I woke up, back in high school, on the exact day I first discovered Chloe was pregnant. She looked terrified, a crumpled piece of paper clutched in her hand. This time, I forced a serene smile. Congratulations, Chloe. Wishing you both a long and happy life, and a healthy baby soon. My gaze lingered on the dropped sheet of paper on the linoleum floor, my mind reeling. Oh, I'm so sorry. The girl descending the stairs hadn't been watching her step and had bumped right into me. She looked up, and Chloe's familiar, achingly young face swam into view. It confirmed the impossible. I was reborn. Reborn into my high school days, on the very day I first discovered Chloe was pregnant. Chloe noticed my stare, her eyes widening in panic as she scrambled to pick up the clinical report from the floor. The bold print of positive pregnancy test seemed to burn itself onto my retinas. Daniel, she stammered, her cheeks flushing. I'd already schooled my features into an expression of mild surprise. Chloe, fancy meeting you here. Don't tell me you've been pulling. Too many all-nighters cramming for exams, and caught a cold, just like me. I feigned a cough, hoping the performance was convincing. Chloe blinked, momentarily thrown. She studied my face, searching for any hint of suspicion, then offered a weak excuse, her voice thin. Oh, just a bit of a stomachache. I'm fine now. My expression remained blandly unconcerned, a mask of polite indifference. Apparently convinced I suspected nothing, Chloe visibly relaxed, a nervous laugh escaping her. She even managed a weak attempt at teasing, a shadow of her usual playful self. Me as dedicated as you. You're the academic star, Daniel. Go home and get some rest. I won't fight you for the top spot in the year this time. She then turned and hurried down the corridor, pulling out her phone. The smile that bloomed on her face as she spoke into it was radiant, utterly unconstrained, a beacon of happiness that was impossible to hide. I knew who she was calling. Kane, her precious, dangerous boyfriend. The rage and heartbreak of my past life. No, my previous life, surged through me, vivid and raw. After Chloe had gotten entangled with that vocational school delinquent, her brother, Chris, a man who had practically been an older brother to me too, had arranged for some older guys to give Kane a beating, a stern warning to stay away. But it turned out their love was a two-way street, a destructive collision course that had already resulted in a new life. When I discovered her pregnancy in that other timeline, Chloe had wept, her body shaking with sobs, begging me not to tell Chris. She'd insisted, with a desperate fervor, that they were truly in love. But Chris had dropped out of school years ago, working grueling hours at his auto repair shop, pouring all his earnings into Chloe's education, wanting her to have the future he couldn't. I couldn't stand by and watch a piece of trash destroy her and everything Chris had sacrificed for her. So I told Chris. He'd moved swiftly, his face a grim mask. He gathered evidence of Kane's petty crimes, theft, vandalism, minor assaults, enough to land him in juvenile detention. Then, with a heavy heart but unyielding resolve, he'd forced Chloe to terminate the pregnancy. From that day on, Chloe had hated me with a passion that consumed her, a cold, burning resentment that never faded. Knowing about my silent, long-standing crush on her, a secret I thought I'd hidden well, she deliberately married me years later, only to inflict the ultimate revenge by aborting our child. Daniel, this is what you owe him. Her face, once so pure and beautiful, had been twisted by a triumphant, vengeful hatred in that memory, a look that haunted my nightmares. The sharp, sterile scent of the hospital disinfectant, so familiar from that other life, snapped me back to the present. This time, I owed no one anything. I wouldn't interfere. For several days, Chloe skipped the evening self-study sessions, a usually sacrosanct part of our high school routine. One evening, as I was buying a savory crepe from a street vendor near the school's back gate, a group of loutish boys on roaring motorcycles pulled up, their laughter coarse and loud. The leader, his greasy dark hair obscuring one eye, a cheap silver stud glinting in his ear, and a cigarette dangling insolently from his lips, was none other than Kane. The lackeys surrounding him leered openly at the uniformed schoolgirls passing by, their gazes invasive, their comments crude. "Man, these schoolgirls are so uptight and boring," one jeered. "What do you expect?" another sneered. "They can't compare to the hottie Kane's got, right? That chick he's with, those legs, that waist, prime stuff." A third chimed in, nudging Kane with his elbow. "Seriously, Kane, you're the man. Knocking up Chris's sister? He's gonna blow a gasket when he finds out, haha." Kane took a long drag from his cigarette, a cold, predatory smirk playing on his lips. "That's nothing," he drawled, exhaling a cloud of smoke. "The real fun will be when I sweet-talk her into having the kid. Then I'll make that idiot Chris kneel and beg me to marry his precious sister. That'll be something to see." "Damn, Kane, you really know how to play the game," his friends hooted, their admiration sickening. My hand, still holding the half-eaten crepe, tightened into a fist, the thin paper crinkling under the pressure. My knuckles were white. Chris owned a small auto repair shop. Some time ago, Kane and his gang had come in for repairs, started trouble, and harassed other customers. Chris, never one to back down, had called the police, and they'd been locked up for a few days. Kane had held a grudge ever since, and deliberately targeted Chloe as revenge. Initially, Kane had pursued Chloe with a persistence that bordered on stalking, daily offerings of food and milk tea at the school gates, which Chloe had steadfastly ignored. Then, one day, he'd heroically saved her from a staged mugging by a few of his own cronies, conveniently getting injured in the process and ending up in the hospital. Against all advice, Chloe, touched by his apparent sacrifice, had insisted on visiting him. That was the beginning of the end. Chris, knowing Kane's manipulative nature and suspecting the staged incident, had been furious. He'd had Kane roughed up again, warning him to stay far away from Chloe. But Chloe, utterly smitten, refused to believe it. She'd tearfully insisted that we all misunderstood Kane, that he was different with her. I never understood what kind of spell that lowlife had cast on her. Chris had even invoked the memory of their long-deceased mother, a tactic that usually brought Chloe to heel. She'd cried all night, but had finally promised to break it off with Kane. It was a promise she didn't keep. Their connection, like a stubborn weed, had merely gone underground. Just then, Chloe emerged from the school gate. Her usually makeup-free face was now artfully made up, her lips a shade too red. Her standard school uniform had been replaced with a short, pleated sailor-style skirt that looked out of place and far too revealing. She approached Kane, a shy, hesitant look on her face. "Kane, this is the first time I've worn clothes like this. Does it look strange?" Kane let out a wolf whistle, his eyes raking over her. "Baby, you look damn hot." Chloe frowned slightly at his crude language, but then looped her arm through his, her voice soft and wheedling. "Could you try to quit smoking? The smoke isn't good for the baby." "Sure, baby. Anything for you." Kane purred, his voice dripping with false affection, patting her stomach with a possessive gesture that made my skin crawl. Chloe blushed, climbing onto the back of his motorcycle, her arms wrapping around his waist. The gang erupted in whoops and catcalls. With a deafening roar of engines, they sped off, disappearing in a cacophony of noise and derisive hoots, leaving a trail of disapproving stares in their wake. I slowly lowered my gaze, the crepe in my hand suddenly tasteless. I had made my decision. I wouldn't interfere. Chloe's choices were her own. I would respect them, offer my blessings, and stay out of it. But as I walked home after the evening study session, I found Chris waiting at the entrance to our alleyway, his face etched with worry. "Daniel, you're back. Have you seen Chloe?" Chris was the last person I wanted to face right now. Chloe and I had grown up together, our houses in the same old courtyard. Chris, 7 years older than us, had always treated me like a younger brother. He knew I liked Chloe. He'd often tease me, warning me good-naturedly not to bully his sister, but in my previous life, he'd been the one constantly trying to set us up. Lying to him felt like a betrayal. "Chris, I'm sorry. Chloe hasn't been coming to evening study for the past few days. I thought she'd gone home." Chris sighed, a heavy sound that spoke of deep exhaustion. His eyes, usually bright with humor, were clouded with a worry that tugged at my conscience. "It's not your fault, Daniel. Ever since I forced her to break up with that scumbag, she's barely spoken to me. Her grades on the last monthly exam weren't good either. I'm worried she's still mixed up with him." Chloe and I were both top students, in the same advanced class. We usually vied for first and second place. But it wasn't just the last exam. Her performance in recent quizzes had plummeted. First place was a distant memory for her now. I was torn. I didn't want to repeat the tragedy of the past, but Chris had always been so good to me. He worked himself to the bone for Chloe. I couldn't bear the thought of him being kept in the dark, his sacrifices leading to ruin. As I wrestled with my conscience, the roar of a motorcycle approached, then cut off abruptly at the alley entrance. Kane was dropping Chloe off. She probably didn't dare let him come any closer, fearing Chris would see. Kane seemed reluctant to let her go. As she dismounted, he grabbed her by the waist, pulling her close, his face leaning in for a kiss. "You little bastard. You've got a death wish." Chris exploded, lunging forward and landing a solid punch on Kane's jaw. Chloe screamed. Kane, caught off guard, tumbled to the ground with his motorcycle, a pathetic, sprawling mess. Chris, his face a mask of fury, the muscles in his work-hardened arms bunched and taut, hauled Kane up by his collar, ready to strike again. But Chloe desperately clung to his arm. "Brother, stop it. Please." Kane seized the opportunity, scrambling to his feet and fleeing on his bike. Chris, trembling with rage, rounded on Chloe. "Chloe, so you are still seeing him." Chloe avoided his gaze, her guilt palpable. Then her eyes darted to me, standing silently by, and a flash of resentment hardened her expression. "Brother, did Daniel tell you?" A shiver ran down my spine. Here we go again. Chris's anger flared even brighter. "Daniel has no time to bother with your messes. He's busy studying every day. And you? Running around with that good-for-nothing lowlife. Chloe, how can you do this to me? After everything." Chloe, stung by his words, her eyes reddening, retorted defiantly. "It's not like I forced you. Fine, stop paying for my school then. I'll drop out right now and be with him." Crack. The sharp sound of a slap echoed in the narrow alley. Chloe slowly raised her head, her hand pressed to her cheek, her eyes wide with disbelief. Chris's face, moments before a mask of rage, crumpled with instant regret. But Chloe, a wounded animal, shoved him away violently and ran off, sobbing. Chris scrubbed his face hard with his hands, then turned to me with a bitter, weary smile. "Sorry, Daniel. You had to witness that family drama." I shook my head, unsure what to say. Chris let out another long, ragged sigh, his voice thick with regret and helplessness. "I've treasured her, protected her since she was a baby, never laid a finger on her. Now she's going to hate me for this." Their father had abandoned the family years ago, and their mother had passed away not long after. Chris, just a young man himself, had become both father and mother to Chloe, truly loving her with all his heart. "Chris," I ventured carefully, "Chloe's very headstrong right now. Forcing them apart might just backfire. What if you try to manage her for now, and let her slowly see Kane's true colors for herself?" A flicker of hope sparked in Chris's eyes. I didn't want to get directly involved, but seeing Chris so defeated, it didn't sit right. Perhaps this indirect approach, a strategic retreat, was worth a try. Whether it would work or not, well, that was up to Chloe's own fate. The next day, Chloe was back at evening self-study. She threw herself into her studies with a renewed, almost feverish, intensity, seeming to revert to her old, diligent self. Chris had told her that if she could maintain her rank in the top 3 for the academic year, he would consider letting her be with Kane. It was, of course, a stalling tactic. Chloe had fallen behind considerably. Catching up would require immense effort, leaving her less time for Kane. Would he have the patience to stick around if she wasn't so readily available? By my calculations from the previous timeline, Chloe was only about a month or so pregnant. If she saw Kane's true colors soon, there was still time for an abortion without major complications. Our plan, it seemed, was having some effect. Chloe stopped going out to meet Kane, dedicating every spare moment to her books. A few times during breaks, I overheard her in the deserted utility closet, on the phone with him, her voice soft and placating. But Kane clearly didn't have that kind of patience. Their conversations were often punctuated by his raised, angry tones, and she would emerge with red-rimmed, tearful eyes, looking utterly miserable. I offered no comfort. Instead, after the next monthly exam results were posted, I casually tossed her results slip onto her desk. "Chloe," I said, my voice deliberately light but laced with a hint of challenge. "You said you'd let me have first place last time. How many times are you going to let me have it? If you're not getting first, is it because you don't actually like it?" Whispers erupted around us. Our classmates, sensing drama, turned to watch. Aren't they usually good friends? Daniel's being pretty harsh, but it's true. Chloe hasn't even made the top 10 lately, let alone the top 3. TCH, girls just can't keep up in high school. It's always us guys at the top in the end, one arrogant boy scoffed. Oh, please, a girl retorted. Chloe's face paled. She snatched up the paper, her knuckles white as she crumpled it, her lips trembling. Daniel, you just wait and see. She had always been fiercely proud, easily provoked. Her competitive spirit, which I knew so well, was ignited. For the next month or two, Chloe studied with a vengeance, driven by the singular goal of surpassing me. Her academic foundation was strong, and after 2 more monthly exams, she clawed her way back into the top 3. Chris was both overjoyed and worried. Chloe's academic success was a relief, but he could never truly allow her to be with Kane. Just before the end of the term, our form teacher called Chloe and me into her office with exciting news. We had both qualified for early admission consideration to Z University, one of the top institutions in the country. A successful interview next week would secure our places. However, there was a catch. The school had only been allocated 1 guaranteed spot. Chloe's face lit up. Z University had always been her dream school. Daniel, she declared, her eyes shining with determination, I'm not letting you have this spot. A faint pang, a ghost of my old affection, stirred within me. Her confident, determined expression, that was the Chloe I had once loved. The moment we left the office, Chloe eagerly dialed Kane's number, her voice bubbling with excitement as she shared the news. My own smile faded. As she continued talking, the joy on her face slowly gave way to hesitation. Kane, I might not be able to make it to your birthday party. Kane's birthday party. Of all the rotten luck, it was scheduled for the exact same day as the Z University admission interview. Anyone with half a brain could see he hadn't planned this with good intentions. He clearly didn't want Chloe to attend the interview. His ultimate goal in targeting Chloe was to get revenge on Chris by ruining her future. He wouldn't just sit back and let her achieve her dreams. But Chloe, blinded by her infatuation, couldn't see it. Kane moved his birthday party a day earlier just for me. How could he possibly want to hurt me? She argued when I voiced my suspicions. I bit back my frustration and deliberately goaded her. Suit yourself. There's only 1 spot. If you don't go, it's mine. Better for me if you skip it. Seeing my smug, opportunistic expression, Chloe hesitated, her pride warring with her desire to please Kane. But a sense of unease still gnawed at me. The night before the interview, Chloe received another call from Kane. As soon as she hung up, she grabbed her bag and made a dash for the door. I moved quickly, blocking her path. Chloe, the interview is tomorrow morning. Her eyes were wide with panic. But Kane said he's waiting for me at the school gate right now. He said if I don't go, we're through. I can't. I have to go see him. She shoved me aside. My heart sank. Steeling myself, I followed her. Kane was indeed waiting at the school gate, lounging against his motorcycle. When he saw me trailing Chloe, he smirked, a piece of beetle nut staining his teeth as he chewed. Well, Chloe baby, is this bookworm the reason you've been avoiding me? Chloe rushed to deny it. Kane, don't misunderstand. He's nothing to me. Daniel, just go back. Kane's eyes flickered over me, a sneer twisting his lips. Nothing to you? I don't think this nerd feels the same way, does he? My fists clenched at my sides. He spat a wad of reddish-brown beetle nut juice, staining my clean shirt. The malice in his eyes was palpable. Stop pretending, kid. You like my girlfriend, don't you? That's why you're always trying to provoke her, to get her attention. You're just trying to break us up, hoping I'll dump her, right? Chloe stared, momentarily confused, thinking he was just being jealous. Kane, it's not like that. Kane shot her a glare. Are you stupid? The way this kid stares at you, it's like his eyes are glued to your body. And wasn't he the one standing next to you when your brother caught us that time? You think he's not interested in you? Get real. Chloe slowly turned to look at me, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning realization, then to a cold, simmering anger. Daniel, you. I remained silent. What could I say? Her face hardened, her voice stiff. Daniel, I already have a boyfriend. It's impossible between us. I sighed, a wave of weariness washing over me. Chloe, you're overthinking this. I just wanted to remind you, if your boyfriend truly cared about you, he wouldn't call you out at such a critical time, right before your interview. If you act so willfully, your brother will be heartbroken. At the mention of Chris, Chloe wavered, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Kane laughed, a harsh, grating sound, and swung his leg over his motorcycle. Chloe baby, you always said you were happy with me because your brother kept you on such a tight leash. and I gave you freedom to do whatever you wanted. But it looks like you're better off as a good little girl after all. Go on back to your brother with this nerd." Chloe immediately panicked, grabbing his arm. "Kane, don't leave me. I'll go with you." A triumphant smirk spread across Kane's face. My heart plummeted. It felt like a stone sinking into a dark, cold abyss. "Chloe," she cut me off, her voice cold and final. "Daniel, leave me alone. This is my choice." And with that, she got on the back of his motorcycle, and they sped off into the night, leaving me standing there, a bitter taste in my mouth. The next day at the interview, Chloe arrived looking flustered and disheveled. Dark circles underscored her eyes. Her face was pale and drawn, and the faint but unmistakable stench of alcohol clung to her. It was obvious she'd been out all night, with no rest. When it was her turn, she fumbled even simple questions, her answers rambling and incoherent. I saw the interviewers exchange glances, their brows furrowed in disapproval. Chloe grew even more flustered, beads of sweat forming on her forehead. Halfway through, she suddenly clapped a hand over her mouth, a wave of nausea overwhelming her, and rushed out of the room. She collapsed in the restroom. When she was found, a few teachers and I helped get her to the hospital. This time, her pregnancy couldn't be hidden. When Chris arrived, his face was ashen, his lips pressed into a thin, hard line. He was so furious, he was speechless, his reaction almost identical to the one in my previous life. As soon as Chloe regained consciousness, Chris, his voice tight with controlled anger, told her she had to terminate the pregnancy. Immediately, Chloe's face turned deathly white. She clutched at his sleeve, her eyes pleading. "Brother, please. I want to have this baby." Veins throbbed in Chris's temples. He ground out the words through clenched teeth. "Chloe, you are 17. 17. You haven't even graduated high school. Have you lost your damn mind?" Chloe's face was chalky, her hands gripping the bedsheet so tightly her knuckles were white. Chris took a deep, shuddering breath, struggling for control. "You're my sister. I don't blame you for being foolish. But that dog, that bastard. I'll make him pay for this. I'll make sure he never dares to hurt you again." Chloe panicked instantly. "Brother, you promised. You said if I kept my grades up, you'd agree to let me be with him." Chris let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "Chloe, if I let you stay with that scumbag, I'd be pushing you into a pit of fire. If you'd gotten involved with Daniel, even if it was puppy love, I wouldn't have objected so strongly. But you chose him. Don't you understand that lowlife has no good intentions for you at all?" I started, an involuntary movement, wanting to clarify, to say something, anything. Chloe's eyes, red and wild, shot daggers at me, then swung back to her brother, her voice trembling with accusation. "So, you and Daniel plotted this together to trick me? You never intended for me to be with Kane, did you?" Chris's face was grim. He didn't deny it. Chloe's voice rose, cracking with tears, raw with despair. "What's so good about Daniel? Why can't you all just give Kane a chance? He might be a punk, but he understands me. He's good to me. Brother, for the first time in years, he made me feel like I had a warm home. I can't lose him. I'll die." Chris's face grew darker with every word she uttered. Disappointment and grief warred within him, threatening to spill over. But Chloe, oblivious, continued her desperate, rambling defense of Kane, painting him as some misunderstood romantic hero. I sighed internally. We had been too optimistic. Love, or rather infatuation, truly can make people terrifyingly blind. Stepping out of the hospital room, I apologized to Chris. I had tried my best, but I couldn't stop Chloe. Chris let out a long, weary sigh and clapped me on the shoulder. "It's not your fault, Daniel. The girl's just possessed." I returned to school. Not long after, Chris called. Chloe had agreed to the abortion. Over the phone, Chris sounded immensely relieved. But even as I shared his relief, a nagging unease settled in my gut. Something felt off. In the previous life, Chloe had held on to that pregnancy and the subsequent abortion as a weapon against me for so long. Why the sudden change of heart this time? My suspicions lingered, but Chris was already making arrangements for the procedure. He said Chloe was calm, resigned. After observing her for a few days, he, too, relaxed his guard, no longer watching over her constantly. The night before the scheduled surgery, Chloe disappeared. She sent Chris a text message. She was eloping with Kane and would return after the baby was born. None of us had anticipated this. We hadn't imagined Chloe would use the same deceptive tactics against Chris, the brother who had raised her, who loved her unconditionally. We never thought she would betray him so completely for a lowlife like Kane. In the end, Chris relented. How could he not? She was his baby sister, the one he'd cherished and protected his whole life. How could he truly abandon her, pregnant and alone with that scumbag? After a tumultuous week that felt like a poorly scripted drama, Chloe returned. There was a new addition to her appearance. A thin, but noticeable, scar marred the smooth skin of her cheek. During their elopement, Kane had been driving recklessly, and they'd had a minor accident. Chloe's face had been scraped. When Chris learned the scar would be permanent, his fists clenched so tightly they trembled, his eyes blazing with a murderous rage that was terrifying to behold. Kane, however, was arrogant and unrepentant, a smirk playing on his lips. Chris, old pal, don't get so worked up. If you hadn't tried to force Chloe to abort and break us up, she wouldn't have gotten hurt, right? But no biggie, I'll take care of her for life. And Chloe, tragically, defended him. Brother, don't blame him. Kane won't mind my scar. He loves me, not just my face. Kane, having achieved his twisted objective, grinned obnoxiously. Before leaving, he deliberately slammed his shoulder into mine, a parting shot. Chris was visibly heartbroken, his disappointment a palpable weight in the room. But Chloe, oblivious or uncaring, continued to plead with him. Brother, the baby is almost 4 months old now. In just another 6 months, you'll be an uncle. Can you really bear to abort your own nephew? He's my flesh and blood, a living being. I spoke then, my voice cold, devoid of emotion. Chloe, that is an embryo. And for it, you're dropping out of school, missing your college entrance exams, and burdening your brother. It's a liability, and it's about to become a permanent stain on your life. Chloe laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Daniel, don't think I don't know what you're after. Even without this baby, without Kane, I would never be with you. Things had reached an impasse. I shook my head, a faint, pitying smile on my lips. You misunderstand. I wish you both a long and happy life, and a healthy baby soon. Chloe stared, stunned into silence. I didn't say another word. I turned and walked away, heading home. I had a stack of exam prep books waiting for me. Her teenage angst drama wasn't my concern anymore. Chloe officially withdrew from school. Speculation about her reasons buzzed through the classrooms for a couple of weeks, then gradually faded as the official list of early university admissions was announced and attention shifted. I was on that list. I wouldn't have to take the grueling national college entrance exams. My form teacher, Mrs. Davison, called me into her office. She congratulated me, then asked if I still wanted to sit for the exams, just for the experience. Apparently, some of the other early admitted students were eager to, feeling it would be a shame to miss out after years of preparation. My response was immediate. Thank you, Mrs. Davison, but I'll pass. Let the other students have the opportunity. Was she kidding? High school had been hellish enough the first time around. Reborn, I'd finally secured this early escape. Why on earth would I willingly jump back into that pressure cooker? Mrs. Davison chuckled. Our conversation eventually drifted to Chloe. The teacher's smile faded. Ah, Chloe's such a pity. At the beginning of the year, her grades were even more consistent than yours, Daniel. Mrs. Davison was one of the few who knew the real reason for Chloe's withdrawal. So young, so reckless, she sighed, shaking her head. She doesn't understand that for a girl her age, an unwed pregnancy, it's a disaster for her future. Her words would prove to be prophetic. But for Chloe, at that moment, it clearly didn't seem like a disaster. She posted twice on her social media. One was a series of photos of Kane accompanying her to a prenatal checkup, the two of them posing and smiling, a public declaration of their love. The other was a photo taken from outside a classroom, focused on an empty desk in the third row, fourth seat. Her old desk. The caption read, "See you in a year." My finger hovered over the screen for a few seconds, then I swiped past. It wasn't long, however, before I ran into her again. It was a Friday afternoon. My classmates, still deep in the trenches of exam preparation, were cramming in the study hall. I, the enviably carefree, early admitted student, decided to browse the local supermarket. Daniel, is that you? I turned. Chloe was standing behind me, pushing a shopping cart. We hadn't spoken since that last, bitter confrontation. My parents and I had moved to a new apartment complex the previous year, and I hadn't been back to our old neighborhood. Chloe was wearing a loose-fitting maternity dress, but even its voluminous folds couldn't hide her significantly large belly. Her hair, once so vibrant, was unkempt and lank, her complexion sallow. She was a ghost of the vibrant, lively girl I remembered. You got into Z University, right? Congratulations, she said, her voice flat. I nodded. Thanks. I was about to walk away when she called out. Daniel, could you leave me your notes and study materials from the last 2 years? She forced a strained smile. I want to review them when I have time. That way, when I re-enroll next year, I can catch up more easily. I was surprised. I hadn't expected her to still harbor such academic ambitions. But then, remembering her fierce determination and work ethic from our younger years, it wasn't entirely shocking. Sure, I said, but I'm not sure exactly which ones you'll need. I can send you a list on WeChat later, and you can tell me. The words were barely out of my mouth when Chloe recoiled, her eyes wide with alarm. No, don't. Just mail the materials to my brother's place. She looked like a cornered animal. Before I could ask why, a furious figure stormed up behind me. Kane. His face was contorted with rage as he jabbed a finger at my nose. You bastard, still trying to hit on my woman. Chloe quickly stepped between us, her expression fearful, trying to placate him. And then it hit me. Chloe didn't want any direct contact with me, terrified of Kane's jealousy. A humorless smile tugged at my lips. I was about to leave when Kane shot me a taunting grin. He snaked an arm around Chloe's waist, his hand sliding down her pregnant belly in a disgustingly possessive way, then moving even lower. It was sickening to watch. Chloe stiffened, her voice a strained whisper. Someone's watching. Kane, don't. As she tried to push him away, Kane's expression turned thunderous. He slapped her hard across the face. You damn slut. You think you're too good for me now that I've had you? I've touched every part of you. What? You won't let me touch you in front of this nerd. Chloe stumbled, nearly crashing into a nearby shelf of goods. She clutched her stinging cheek, her eyes wide with shock and humiliation. Kane, you hit me? You're my woman. So what if I hit you? He snarled. My brow furrowed in disgust. I immediately pulled out my phone and called the police. The two of them, oblivious, continued their ugly argument in the crowded supermarket aisle, their voices rising in a torrent of accusations and abuse. I told you, if you ever laid a hand on me, we're through. Chloe cried, her voice trembling. Kane laughed mockingly. Oh yeah? Go ahead, break up with me. Take a good look at your face. It's scarred. Who else would want you now, huh? Chloe's pupils contracted. The sweet nothings and vows of eternal love Kane had once whispered to her had transformed into poisoned barbs, now ruthlessly wielded against her. A few older shoppers nearby began to mutter amongst themselves, their voices dripping with disapproval. These young people nowadays, so reckless. That girl looks so young, and her belly, TSK, no self-respect. The poor girl, though. If I were her parents, seeing my precious child treated like this by such a brute, I'd die of anger. The police arrived quickly. Security footage and eyewitness accounts confirmed that Kane had assaulted a pregnant Chloe. But Kane, belligerent and defiant, insisted it was a domestic dispute and none of their business. All her life, Chloe had basked in the admiring and envious gazes of others. Now, the eyes on her were filled with a mixture of pity and disdain. Chloe's face was ashen. When she heard the police officer say they needed to contact her family, she shook her head violently. Officer, please. We were just playing around. They were let off with a verbal warning. Kane slung an arm around Chloe's shoulders, shooting me a look of triumph as he led her away. Chloe kept her head bowed, avoiding everyone's gaze. In my previous life, both before and after our marriage, I had never laid a finger on Chloe. Her own father had been an alcoholic who, when drunk, would turn violent, beating his wife and children. Chris, always protective of their mother, would tell Chloe to hide outside. Whenever their father started his rampage, Chloe often ended up huddled in the dark, cramped stairwell of their apartment building, trying to do her homework by the dim emergency light. When I told my parents about her situation, they pitied her deeply. Our home became her sanctuary. She once told me, her eyes shining with a fierce longing as she looked at the bright desk lamp in my room. I'm so envious of your lamp, Daniel. I offered to give it to her, but she shook her head, her gaze resolute. No, I'll study hard, earn my own money, and buy my own bright lamp. Then I'll kick Dad out and give Mom and brother a good life. I remembered that moment for years. In that instant, she had shone with an inner light, a fierce determination. Because of her childhood experiences, I knew she abhorred domestic violence. She often confided in me, her young voice filled with confusion and pain. Why doesn't Mom leave Dad? Why can't she be braver? He hits her, but she still defends him to outsiders. I was too young then. I didn't understand either. All I could do was promise to protect her, to never let anyone bully her. In my previous life, I had kept that promise. But she hadn't cared. This life, I chose to be a bystander. I wondered if, in that moment of humiliated departure from the supermarket, Chloe realized she had become the very image of the mother she once couldn't understand. In September, I smoothly transitioned into life at Z University. The campus felt familiar. I had spent 4 years here in my previous life. The only difference was that then, Chloe had been the one admitted early, and I had followed by passing the regular exams. This time, I was alone. During the National Day holiday, I returned to my hometown and visited my old high school to see Mrs. Davison. She was still teaching a graduating class. I casually asked about Chloe. Mrs. Davison's expression shifted, a sigh escaping her lips. She dropped out, less than 2 weeks into the new school year. She explained that Chloe had apparently broken up with Kane, but he hadn't let her go easily, repeatedly showing up at the school gates to harass her. After security called the police a few times, he backed off for a while. But then, scandal erupted. Inappropriate photos and even a crudely edited video, supposedly of Chloe, began circulating among the students. Though faces were blurred and identities uncertain, Chloe's reaction had been extreme. Unable to bear the vicious rumors and constant whispers, she had withdrawn from school altogether just a few days later. Her current whereabouts were unknown. Mrs. Davison shook her head sadly. Once you get tangled with scum like that, your whole life can be ruined. A strange pang went through me, thinking of the study notes Chloe had asked for, notes she would now never use. After saying goodbye to Mrs. Davison, I found myself wandering aimlessly, my feet leading me back to my old neighborhood. Chris's auto repair shop was still there, but the man I saw standing in front of it, barely 30, gave me a shock. In just over a year, much of Chris's dark hair had turned gray. His shoulders were slumped, and he looked years older than his actual age. When he saw me, his tired eyes lit up for a moment with surprised recognition. "Daniel? You're back." "Yeah, Chris. Long time no see." Chris was genuinely pleased to see me and insisted on taking me out for a late-night meal. "University life suits you, huh?" he said, trying for a cheerful tone. "I wanted to treat you to a meal to congratulate you on graduating high school, but it was right around Chloe's due date." His voice trailed off, the smile fading from his lips. "Chloe, she didn't live up to expectations. I always thought you two would go to university together, maybe even." "Ah, well, no point talking about it." I understood his unspoken words. In our previous life, Chloe and I had married after graduating from university. But that was another lifetime. We ate in a comfortable silence for a while. Finally, I couldn't hold back. I told him I knew about Kane tormenting Chloe and forcing her to drop out. "Why didn't Chloe go to the police about the photos?" I asked. The target was so obvious. It had to be Kane. Distributing obscene materials was a crime. Getting him locked up, even for a few years, would have at least given her some respite from his harassment. Chris's face darkened, his jaw tightening. "We did call the police. That bastard was even arrested." But his voice was laced with a mixture of fury and helpless resignation. "Chloe said. She said her child couldn't have a father who'd been in jail. It would affect him for life." I was speechless. It seemed so logical, in a twisted way, yet so utterly absurd. A shrill ring from Chris's phone shattered the heavy silence. He answered, listened for a mere 2 seconds, and a murderous glint appeared in his eyes. "Wait for me. I'm coming right now to deal with him." Kane was harassing Chloe again. Fearing Chris would do something rash, I quickly dialed the emergency number. When the police dragged Kane away, his face bruised and swollen, he was still shouting defiantly. "Wife, I'll be back for you in a couple of days. Don't even think about hiding. You're mine, and I'll haunt you even as a ghost." A downstairs neighbor later told us that Kane frequently showed up at Chloe's apartment, demanding money. If she refused, he'd create a drunken scene, threatening her, disturbing the entire building. Everyone was fed up. Through a crack in Chloe's apartment door, illuminated by the dim hallway light, I saw her. She was slumped beside a baby's crib in the living room, her body trembling, tears streaking her face. Yet, even in her terror, she was trying to soothe a wailing infant. We were 19 that year. Chloe herself was still little more than a child, but the exhaustion and weariness etched on her face made her look as if she had weathered a lifetime of hardship. Looking at her, a quote from Simone de Beauvoir echoed in my mind. Woman's misfortune is to be surrounded by almost irresistible temptations. She is not asked to make an effort of impetus. She is merely encouraged to slide gently down to happiness. When she perceives she has been fooled by a mirage, it is too late. Her strength has been exhausted in a futile adventure. When I left Chris that night, his expression was dark and brooding, his grief and anger a palpable force. The chilling glint of determination in his eyes was deeply unsettling. It was pure coincidence that I saw Chloe again years later. Time had flown. I had graduated from Z University and was working at a major tech company, as was my fiancée Mia. We'd met in university, an instant connection that deepened over time. After graduation, we bought an apartment in the city where we'd studied, and my parents had moved in with us. I rarely returned to my hometown. This time, however, our old high school class president had been persistent in inviting us to a reunion. Mia, curious about my past, was keen to go, so we made the trip. It had been years since we'd all seen each other. The atmosphere was warm and convivial. After a few rounds of drinks, Mia, having easily mingled with my old classmates, began to ask about my high school days. The class president laughed heartily. Daniel? He was the undisputed academic king. Before his early admission, he topped the ranks every single year. He absolutely crushed us. A female classmate chimed in playfully. Hey, he had competition, you know. I remember in our first year, he lost to Chloe several times. At the mention of Chloe's name, an uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Sensing the sudden tension, the class president quickly changed the subject, teasing Mia and me about who had pursued whom. Laughter erupted, breaking the awkwardness. When they heard our wedding was approaching, the class president ordered a bottle of champagne. Congratulations, congratulations. Here's to 100 years of happiness and a beautiful baby soon. Clink crash. A champagne flute shattered on the floor. The waitress who had just entered the private room apologized profusely, her head bowed. Her voice, though muffled, sounded vaguely familiar. A girl sitting near the door gasped. Chloe. All eyes turned. Recognized. Chloe's face turned deathly pale. She shot a panicked glance around the room, then turned and fled. A ripple of shock went through me. The others were equally stunned. Whoa, was that really Chloe? No way. She looked kind of old. What's she doing working as a waitress here? I heard she went back to repeat her final year of high school after dropping out. Did she fail her exams again? You guys haven't heard? Apparently, she got tangled up with some punk. The gossip started to flow. While everyone was chattering, I excused myself to go to the restroom. On my way back, I noticed the door to a nearby utility room was slightly ajar. Inside, a small boy, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, was tugging at Chloe's apron, crying fretfully. Mommy, I want to go home. Chloe's face was haggard, etched with fine lines. As she gently wiped the boy's tears, I noticed the roughness of her hands. The years had clearly not been kind to her. The boy continued to wail. Chloe, clearly stressed and needing to get back to work, lost her patience and slapped him lightly on the arm. Cry, cry, cry. You're so noisy. Don't you know Mommy has to work very hard to take care of you? Can't you be a little more understanding? She looked up and saw me. Her face stiffened. Realizing there was no escape, her expression turned cold and defiant. Daniel, you're here to laugh at me, aren't you? Time had wrought such changes. All I felt was a profound sense of sorrow for what might have been. In my previous life, at this very age, she had been a brilliant engineer at a Fortune 500 company, her starting salary impressive. Now, she was a high school dropout, raising a young son alone, working as a waitress to make ends meet. Fate is a terrifying thing, especially for women. I said nothing, simply pulled a pack of tissues from my pocket and offered it to her. Chloe's eyes reddened. She slapped the tissues from my hand, her voice rising, raw with emotion. I don't need your pity. I know what you all say about me. That I was stupid, that I was cheap. I was out of my mind back then, but why didn't any of you stop me? Her voice cracked. Daniel, didn't you like me? Why didn't you stop me? I knew this was the outburst of a broken spirit, someone lashing out in pain. My own heart remained unmoved, except for a faint, weary sadness. It was all so futile. Really? No one advised you? I asked, my voice calm, watching the flicker of guilt cross her face. Didn't I try to warn you? Didn't your brother plead with you? Chloe. I continued, my tone gentle but firm. You said it was your own choice, that no one should interfere. You were the one who told your own brother, the man who raised you, that Kane, that lowlife, was the only one who had ever given you the warmth of a home. Have you forgotten all that? Chloe shook her head mutely, but her eyes, wide and haunted, were filled with a raw terror and a regret so profound it was almost tangible. Chloe, I said softly, people have to be responsible for their own decisions. There are no do-overs in life. Getting a second chance myself, that was the miracle of my lifetime. But not everyone gets one. I turned and walked away. Chloe's choked sobs faded behind me, her despairing cries of, "It wasn't me, it wasn't me," lost in the distance. After Mia and I returned from our honeymoon, my parents delivered shocking news. Chris was dead. Kane had continued to harass Chloe and her son relentlessly over the years. Chris, unable to bear it any longer, had finally confronted him. A violent argument ensued. Kane, it turned out, was carrying a knife. In the struggle to protect Chloe, Chris was stabbed. In a final, desperate act, Chris had pushed Kane, sending him tumbling down a flight of stairs. Kane died instantly at the scene. Chris, however, had been critically wounded. He died on the way to the hospital. The incident made the local news. On the flickering television screen, I saw Chloe, disheveled and heartbroken, collapsing over her brother's lifeless body, her anguished cries tearing through the air. "Brother, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. I regret it. I really regret it." A deep ache settled in my chest. Not for her, but for Chris. Reborn, I hadn't been able to change his fate. Perhaps everyone has their own unalterable destiny. I could only hope that somewhere, somehow, heaven might grant him the mercy of a second chance too. The next day, I received a series of text messages from an unknown number. "Daniel, I dreamed I got into Z University, graduated, joined a Fortune 500 company, became a female executive, and even married you. My brother didn't die. Everything was fine. Perfect, even." The last message, just 3 words, was the most heartbreaking. If only not dream. That evening, the police recovered the bodies of a mother and child from the local river. Chloe never knew, even in death. This wasn't just a dream. It was her stable, happy life. A life she had personally, tragically, destroyed. Mia asked me why I was staring into space, my expression so grim. I forced a smile and deleted all the messages. Past people and events, let them be sealed in memory. Fate is capricious. Cherish the person beside you. End.